If you're exhausted all the time, it's not because you're weak. Forcing conversations, forcing confidence, forcing relationships, forcing success. And they think this is strength. They think this is discipline. It's resistance disguised as action. And it's costing you more than you realize. This channel is for the man who stayed strong when no one noticed. The man who carried responsibility quietly and slowly disappeared. Here strength is questioned, silence is exposed, and the cost of. And what happens when you finally stop? You can tell immediately when someone is forcing. When someone is performing confidence instead of embodying it, you sense it. When a conversation is being pushed instead of flowing naturally, everyone knows, and you can feel it in yourself. 2. The tension in your shoulders when you're trying to control an outcome. The exhaustion after a conversation where you were managing every word. The heaviness after forcing yourself to be productive when your body needed rest. That's not discipline. That's war with reality, where you're carefully choosing every word, monitoring their reaction, adjusting your tone, making sure you're saying the right thing, and when it's over, you're drained. Exhaustion because rest feels like failure. You drink coffee to stay alert, you power through the fog, you deliver the work. Because you forced productivity that wasn't naturally there. It's the relationship that requires constant effort to maintain. Every interaction feels like work. You're always trying, always adjusting, always performing. But it's not commitment, it's force. There's a time for action and a time for stillness. A time to push and a time to flow. And forcing is what happens when you push at the wrong time. Think about water. It doesn't force its way through obstacles. It finds the path of least resistance. It flows around rocks. It waits for the right moment. It moves when the conditions are right. Hard and movable, forcing your way through everything. And you wonder why you're exhausted, why nothing feels natural, why success doesn't bring peace. Because you're rowing when you should be sailing. Because when you force yourself to be someone you're not, when you force yourself to want things you don't actually want, when you force yourself into a life that looks right, but feels wrong, you forget who you actually are. You become the performance. And the person underneath, the one you were before you started forcing, that person disappears. And one day you look in the mirror and you don't recognize who's looking back. Second, you're building the wrong life. Because you don't know what you actually want until you're quiet enough to hear it. But you're never quiet. You're always forcing yourself toward the next goal, the next achievement, the next thing you think you should want. So you achieve things that don't fulfill you. You build a life that looks successful but feels empty. You force yourself to be grateful for what you have while ignoring the quiet voice that says this isn't right. And you end up successful at someone else's definition of success. Rich in things that don't matter. Accomplished in areas that don't bring joy. And you can't even blame anyone because you're the one who forced yourself there. Third, you're confusing discipline with self-destruction. You think forcing yourself through exhaustion is discipline. You think ignoring your body's signals is strength. You think pushing through pain is what strong men do. But discipline isn't ignoring your limits, it's respecting them. Strength isn't forcing yourself to keep going, it's knowing when to stop. And pushing through pain isn't noble. It's just slow suicide dressed up as work ethic. You're not disciplined. You're just really good at destroying yourself and calling it productivity. Here's the paradox you can't accept. The more you force, the more resistance you create. The tighter you grip, the more it slips away. You can't force someone to love you. You can't force success through sheer willpower. You can't force peace by controlling everything. And you can't force yourself to be someone you're not without eventually breaking. But here's what happens when you stop forcing. When you stop forcing conversations and just speak honestly, connection happens naturally. When you stop forcing confidence and just accept where you are, real confidence emerges. When you stop forcing productivity and work with your natural rhythm, you accomplish more with less effort. When you stop forcing life and start flowing with it, everything becomes easier. Not because the challenges disappear, but because you're no longer adding resistance to everything you do. Most men think this means being passive, doing nothing, letting life happen to them. But that's not flow. That's paralysis. Flow is active. It's engaged. It's just not forcing. It's knowing when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to be silent, when to push and when to let go. Think about a fighter who knows when to strike. He's not passive, he's patient. He's not forcing attacks, he's waiting for the opening. And when the moment comes, he acts with precision. Not force, precision. That's the difference. Forcing is constant effort, regardless of conditions. Flowing is strategic action at the right moment. You can feel the difference in your body. When you're forcing, there's tension. Your jaw is clenched. Your shoulders are tight. Your breath is shallow. When you're flowing, there's ease. Your body is relaxed. Your breath is deep. Your movements are natural. Your body knows when you're forcing. It's trying to tell you to stop. But you override it because you think tension equals effort and effort equals worth. But tension isn't effort. Tension is resistance. And resistance drains you without moving you forward. Stop forcing yourself to be productive when your body needs rest. Stop forcing conversations when silence is what's needed. Stop forcing yourself to be someone you're not because you're giving up. And flow is about moving with the tide, not against. Even when the tide is against them. Even when the conditions aren't right. Even when their body is telling them to stop. And they call that discipline. But it's not discipline, it's stubbornness. And stubbornness without wisdom is just exhaustion. Real discipline is knowing when to push and when to flow. When to act and when to wait. When to speak and when to listen. The hero's journey isn't about forcing yourself to be strong. It's about flowing with your actual nature. It's about accepting what is instead of constantly fighting for what should be. Most men are at war with reality. They're forcing life to be different than it is. They're forcing themselves to be different than they are. They're forcing everything because they think control equals safety. But control is an illusion. Because you're finally learning to flow. And when you stop forcing, you stop building the wrong life. You stop confusing self-destruction with discipline. You breathe deeper. You move easier. You speak clearer.